The reason we do what we do at Tittle and Perlmuter is to make our community safer, one case at a time. Well, I'm a dog lover. Unfortunately, some dogs just don't have the proper training and can bite folks. And I've seen some pretty serious cases of dog bites. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring in a dog trainer to talk about how you train dogs properly to make sure that they do not bite other people and how to avoid dog bites. So with that in mind, I'll let Katie Harris from my office take it away.
So preventing dog aggression generally is much less in the hands of the victim and much more in the owner of the dog. And really, if you break it down at its core, it starts with just understanding your dog and being very honest about their behavior. Not every dog is the social butterfly that you might have grown up with. Not every dog is the picture-perfect golden retriever, and that doesn't mean that they're bad dogs necessarily. That simply means that sometimes they need something a little bit different. So when you get into large family gatherings, really busy public places, this kind of new trend of being able to take your dog everywhere with you, that's not ideal for every dog, and that's okay, right? That doesn't mean you have a bad dog or that you can't provide a wonderful life, but sometimes those types of contexts can be so overwhelming for dogs and put them into this fight or flight position where if they don't feel like they can get away in a stressful situation and they're a little bit overwhelmed by it, they may resort to reacting and doing things like lunging, barking, biting to try to make those threats go away. So from the standpoint of the dog owner, the best thing we can do is just understand our dog's threshold and know how to advocate properly for them. So when we notice that they're starting to get a little bit uncomfortable by things, we start minimizing the amount of times these social interactions are going to be happening and people are going to be invading their space to reduce the chances that a bite might actually happen.
And so from a training perspective, how do you approach working with owners and dogs to figure out what those triggers for them might be?
Sure. So generally speaking, the first thing we want to do is get like a read of where like home base is for our dog, right? So, we can put them in various different tests in a controlled manner where I could simulate interacting with the dog in a safe way. We could take the dog to some different public settings and not allow interactions, but just gauge as the stimulation goes up in the environment, what does the dog's state of mind do, right? Do they handle it fine? Do they seem confident? Do they seem like they start getting a little stressed out or shut down? And we start getting a read for just where the dog is at. So we could first and foremost, before we ever start any training, start educating the owner on these are good situations to put your dog in, these are bad situations to put your dog in. If you're gonna have your dog around guests that come over, these are the best practices for doing so from a training standpoint to help make sure that we're not overwhelming them too much and stuff like that.
Got it. What do you think is the number one just thing that dog owners miss about their pets?
That's a good question. A lot of dog owners they're not respectful enough that dogs are dogs still, right? At the end of the day, a dog is an animal, a dog is a predator, a dog has teeth, and they can't communicate verbally like we can. If I had a disagreement with somebody, I could talk to them and explain to them what I'm upset about and have a non-confrontational conversation with them about something like that. A dog can't do that. Their only way of letting a human know that they don't like something is by showing something that we would consider aggression, right? And if we're not understanding them well enough to put them in proper situations, you're gonna see more and more of the dog realizing that they have to be the one that sets those boundaries because we're not gonna do it for them.
Got it. Okay, so you were saying earlier that a lot of what happens with dog behavior comes more down to the owners and understanding their dogs than to the victim of a potential dog bite or dog attack, right?
Correct.
But obviously we know that sometimes bad things do happen.
Yep.
Dogs do lash out. What are some of the signs that might indicate a dog is about to go in that direction?
Sure. Good question. I would say like when you start noticing the dogs stiffen up a lot, right? They start getting tense. We call it the whale eyes. The eyes start getting really expanded. A lot of like holding their breath, right? It's like kind of tensing up, stressing out, stuff like that. Avoidance signs. So if the dog is at actively trying to get away from you. I think, a lot of people kind of have this idea that if a dog is fearful, right, or insecure around a guest that comes over, the guest feels like they need to push the boundary more to try to earn the dog's trust, right? So let's say the dog is uncomfortable and trying to get away from you, and your friend is like, dogs love me, it's fine, don't worry about it, right? And they start pursuing the dog that's trying to get away from them and be like, it's okay, don't worry, this, that. That is the absolute worst thing that you could do in that situation. And I would say that is actually probably the number one thing that I see victims do that put themselves in a position where the dog actually bites. So if a dog shows like avoidance and they need some space, leave them be. Just let them do that, right? And it's our job as the owner to see those signs. And the hardest thing to do as the owner is to tell that friend or that family member, or sometimes even your child, you gotta leave the dog alone. Right? If the dog is trying to do the right thing and give themselves space, allow them to do that.
We want to make sure that we give some input on what people should do if they get into a situation where they have been bitten by a dog. Unfortunately, it does happen, and it can happen really quickly. I think there's kind of 3 categories of what people should be focusing on. Obviously, immediately, you want to make sure that you get medical attention. You want to get to the doctor right away. You want to get checked out. Anything that needs to be stitched up, get it stitched up. Any antibiotics, there can be infections involved with any kind of an animal bite. So make sure you get medical attention right away. Your health is the number 1 priority. The second category of things that you should be doing after a dog bite is sort of gathering information that you might need in order to find out what happened and know what steps need to be taken and who all is involved in this. So definitely want to make sure that you get animal control involved, because they can go out and do a report. They can confirm the dog owner. They can confirm that the dog has its shots, which of course feeds back into taking care of your own health. Also want to make sure that you get photos of both of your injuries and of the dogs, if you can. It's true what the saying is, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So anytime you have an injury that involves a bite or any kind of a wound, you want to make sure you get a picture of that. So it's documented not only at the earliest stage when it first happened, but also as you move forward, as scarring is developing, to just show that journey and that progress of what has happened and everything that you've been through. Third thing that you should do is call a lawyer. All that somebody who's been attacked or had a loved one attacked by a dog should be worrying about is getting better. And by reaching out to a lawyer, you will have the peace of mind to know that they deal with these kinds of things day in and day out. They can take the pressure off of you so that you know you have guidance to get you in the right direction, both with your healing and also with respect to contacting the dog owner and building up the case to pursue whatever claims are available to you. Because at the end of the day, when something like this has happened, it's disruptive. There's often a lot of emotional fear and anxiety that goes along with this. And in order to get to the result that is the most fair for whoever's been attacked by a dog, you want to have an experienced lawyer on your side.
If you're being that guy that's kind of like, I don't want to say bugging the dog, but like you're pushing the boundaries a little too much, the second you start noticing those signs, just stop, right? 90% of the time, dogs don't want to like maul you. You know what I mean? Like in most cases, all they want is for you to go away. And if you just go away, like a lot of times, it obviously just ends. You know, there's different categories of it, right? You have like unprovoked aggression sometimes, right? Which that's a much bigger issue and a much bigger problem, obviously. You know, I called that example, I'd say provoked aggression, right? Which is kind of like, you know, like maybe let's just stop doing what we're doing right now, you know, and just like hit pause and just give the dog some space. You know, if you don't have good training on your dog, if you're having a big gathering, you know, a lot of these incidents happen like when you're having the barbecue and everybody's eating, drinking, having a good time, nobody's paying attention to the dogs, and we're not looking for the signs that the dog is overwhelmed, right? And then something happens where it's like, you know, like even my wife and I, we have 4 dogs, they're highly trained at this point, and if we have a big get together or something like that, the dogs aren't always out for it. You know, sometimes we just put them away to give ourselves a mental break of needing to watch them and pay attention to them and stuff like that. You know, if you're in a context of like an off-leash dog running at you or whatever it may be, which I say is probably like I would guess like probably the number 1 or the number 2 situation, like a dog escapes out of the yard or something like that, starts chasing you down. Sort of kind of quick motion towards the dog to try to kind of startle them away from you or something. That could be significantly more productive, you know. But those situations are hard because you don't know the other dog, right? So it's like, what do I do, right? So I usually, the way I instruct my clients is whatever you need to do to protect yourself, you know. But running is generally not going to be very productive in that case. So.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining us today. Miracle Canine Training in Cleveland. It's been great to talk with you, and hopefully it's been valuable for the people who watch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.